Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Are there such things as astral bodies? What is the whole body and soul thing about? Will aliens save us if we careen off the cliff into nuclear war?
Hello and welcome to the 946th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and those uplifting questions came from my co-host, partner in Paranormal Adventures, and Dad, Paul. And today we welcome back an old and dear friend who hasn't been with us in quite some time, actually, so he's coming back from his little hiatus.
He's not so old, especially compared with me, but the one and only Shane Sirois is back with us for our open line show today to help us tackle your questions on all kinds of paranormal subjects.
So Shane, welcome back.
I'm glad to be back. It's been a while. Been anxious to get back.
Well, welcome.
Well,
home.
it's good to have you back, and I guess we could just hop right into it, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's do that, and let's give the call-in number today from anywhere. It's 401-766-1240. If you'd like to call in. We used to have an 800 number, but nobody knew what that was anymore, so we just...
Yeah, it's fine.
Legacy technology. Anyway, let's get into our first question. This is from Facebook, Doug from Texas.
Yes, and Doug writes to us. Boop. Greetings, gentlemen. I have somewhat of a philosophical question. Paul, you have often stated that how can you be you without your body? Although you make a valid point, I can't help but question the out-of-body experience. There are numerous accounts of people's spirits, soul, consciousness, or whatever, floating above their seemingly lifeless body. Can you explain these experiences from a multiverse perspective? Is there perhaps some validity to the notion of an astral body, quote-unquote? Is there a multiverse equivalent to a so-called astral body?
All right, I'll just start, and then I want to turn it over to Shane and you. But the question is a very good one, but it implies the island theory, okay, that what may be happening is everything that's you is contained within your body and your mind, that sort of thing. That does not apparently seem to be the case since there is non-locality involved, but I hark back to our show 2 weeks ago with Tom Dongo from Arizona, who was a old hand at all this, and we talked about remote viewing. And he said remote viewing is not the same thing as an out-of-the-body experience. And he talked about a friend of his who lived about 350 miles away in Colorado. And he would visit him by remote viewing, and the dog could see him, and he could smell the cooking, and all the physical senses were there. So I asked him, how do you smell the spaghetti sauce cooking, and how do you hear the dog and all this stuff if you don't have your physical senses with you? And he said those words we love to hear. Nobody's ever asked me that before, which is bizarre because it seems pretty obvious to me. So if Tom is right, we're not dealing with any kind of out-of-the-body thing. It's more of a remote viewing thing. Now, every day we hear of near-death experiences, people floating above their bodies, this kind of thing. That doesn't mean that you've got a separate astral body. Now, that's a spiritualist concept that they came up with because they had no other explanation for it. I think more remote viewing is perhaps a multiverse phenomenon. Astral bodies are easier to tie into an explanation for these things. But I think that we are kind of bigger than all that, and our whole consciousness is non-local. So it's the same thing. You're sitting in school. You should be concentrating on math, but your mind is wandering, and you're daydreaming. I think that is not necessarily. You're not leaving your body. You're just somewhere else. Now, I don't know if that's an adequate explanation. Shane, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, that was good. I'll just talk about what happened to me, and then people can take it for whatever. But
Sure.
so I've had several experiences with that throughout my life. One when I was childhood illness, which I talked about on the show, and it started first where I was in my body, but I was in a state. So it was a weird state, like I was basically dying, and then I started to think of certain people, and when I thought of that person, I would go there, like I would just automatically be there, but it was like a swooshing feeling, like a vacuum almost, like I was being sucked to that person that I had a thought of, and I was able to experience. Now, it wasn't them, but I was able to experience them and what they were doing, and I felt their emotions, and I heard their thoughts and everything, but I was still me, if that makes sense, but I was also able to experience what they were experiencing, and I could move. I moved to different places, different houses, different people, but then the next transition in that process was that I was looking at myself, and I was no longer moving to other people. I was myself looking at myself, looking down at myself, and I watched somebody pick me up, my stepfather at the time, carried me down the stairs, and I was above, and I watched the whole thing, and it all took place. It wasn't in my, imagination. I watched him put me in the car, and then I woke up in my body, if you will, and then next thing I know, I'm 30 feet above the emergency room parking lot, and I watched the car pull in, and I watched them pull me out of the back of the car, bring me into the ER, and then at one point I wake up, I'm in my body, but then next thing I know, I'm up in the corner of the ER, and in the far corner, and then but here's a weird thing was I was actually I watched myself sit up and vomit and then lay back down and become unresponsive. But I actually watched myself do that. I watched my body do that. And I even have a memory of being in my body and doing that, but I also viewed it from the upper corner of the ER and outside of myself, if you will. And that took place all the way up until I was brought up. I woke up in the elevator later on, whenever they got me stable or whatever, bringing me up to the ICU, and that's where I remained in my body. But it was, like I said, it was two transitions in that process. One was I could experience whoever I thought of, and then next thing I know, I was just watching myself.
Yeah, that's a beautiful illustration of non-locality. I want to turn it over to Ben, but just before I do, there's the notion of the spatial strangeness in some paranormal experiences. For example, I've dealt with people in what I believe are parallel universes who were up by the ceiling or down like in the floor or somewhere it would make no sense spatially in reference to where I was. So that could be another indication. Maybe the astral body thing is true. I just don't think so. Ben?
Well, that's a good question. I've been doing this sort of fun little experiment lately with how I think, and it's interesting because you can kind of like get lost in thought, and what does it mean to get lost in thought? We say it all the time, but it's like, what does that even really mean? And it's interesting because I look at a lot of sort of ancient literature, and they refer to a lot of things as like rooms and like metaphysical rooms, almost like chambers of different things. And there's a particular thing I was reading that was talking about the chambers of the quote unquote heart. And there's a really fascinating sort of look at how we view our bodies, and that everything sort of has a sort of a spiritual component to it. So like how one, we always say, well, you should really follow your heart. Well, we don't mean like the beating thing in your chest, right?
Well, unless you're meditating.
Right. Well, even then, you could follow it in that sense as well, but it's a physical and it's serving a different purpose at the same time. So not everything has a compartmentalized, just like single purpose. Everything has multiple purposes, right? You say, well, my liver doesn't just do X, it does a bunch of other stuff too, right? It's like your lungs. Your lungs not only provide you with oxygen that is able to put oxygen in your bloodstream. If you control your breathing, it can also lower your heart rate, right? So it's the same sort of thing, but in a different context of, well, what does this mean for the quote unquote, astral body and whatnot? I would say that it's a perfectly normal part of your the whole body of the human person. I think as we understand everything as just kind of being separate parts that just have no relation to each other is just false.
You're right.
Because that's where you get this whole idea of, well, I may have this problem with a certain substance, but that's just my body's problem. My brain has nothing to do with that. It's like, well, no, it does. And it all kind of has to be unified as a portion of one's body. And let me give you an example. It's like, I want to sleep in. I wish I could sleep every day, but I know I have to get up. My body wants something different. My brain wants something different. My mind, which is different than the brain, wants something different. And they all want different things, but the problem is you need a unified sort of purpose to kind of exist. So where am I going with this? It's how we sort of explore our perception of reality. I've kind of come down to the conclusion is it meets us where we are, and how we sort of experience it is kind of based on our perceptions of it. So, I brought this up because I've been thinking a lot about Tom Dongo's interview that we did with him ever since we did it a couple weeks ago. Because I'm like, okay, it's kind of interesting that he still refers to it as, well, I was a spirit, but I could still touch things, and I could still smell things and hear things, and had all of his five physical senses. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? And I think the thing is how we view ourselves is based a lot on Neoplatonism, which kind of popped up with spirituality being, your mind, your spirit, and your body are two separate things, and they have no sort of they have no relation to each other at all. There's like a joke where it's like, okay, well, I don't go for a walk, I take my body for a walk. And that's like a very good example of Neoplatonism. And you can see it a lot in sort of hyper spiritualist realms too, where it's like, okay, well, my body doesn't matter because it's just a flesh machine that I'm forcing it to do things for, right? Because, I die and then I bring knowledge to some ambiguous place and then we all learn things. And it's like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So when we explore not just our thoughts, I wouldn't be surprised, because it sounds like Tom Dongo, when he was explaining his methodology, it was the same thing, right? When we get lost in thought, it's almost like the same thing. And so I think how we view our bodies is kind of like the stepping stone to understanding this whole phenomena. And instead of, looking at, man, I wish I could fit this Cartesian square into this round existential hole, but I can't quite do it. And it's like, well, probably because we need to start from square one, which is, what is a body, right? So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and just maybe Shane has another comment, but just I'm thinking back to our good friend Anthony Peake, the great British consciousness researcher, in my opinion, probably the greatest pioneer of consciousness research of the 21st century so far. And he points out the fact from everyday physics that matter and energy, and you want to say, matter and spirit or whatever, the big dichotomy people set up, really doesn't exist. Matter is energy. As a matter of fact, he points out that if you take all the empty space out of our bodies, we would be about the size of a grain of sand on the beach, or even smaller. So, I mean, and it's just, and here comes the term vibration. It all depends on how things are, molecules are vibrating, whether something, and even things that appear solid or not. I mean, I've met shamans who claim that they knew other shamans who could walk through walls literally because of the empty space, and they knew all about this. So if matter and energy are the same thing, where's the problem? I don't know. Shane, you have any comment on that?
No, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing, but so you got energy and mass or whatever, but you get that one particle telling that it's a chair, and that the particle telling us that we're a human, we're a body, and a cup is a cup, but it's all energy, it's all mass, or mass is energy, and you just got that one thing telling each thing what it is, and no one fully understands that one particle yet, but it's very interesting because it kind of makes sense to everything I've kind of like realized about our work in the paranormal, and then my own experiences and everything, and especially getting down to vibration, energy, and frequency, which I'll get more into if we cover Peter's question today. So,
yes, we will. But I think one more question on that, the theme of Cartesian dualism here. This is from Eileen, and not sure where Eileen is from.
Okie dokie. So Eileen writes to us. So you think what we see as ghosts/spirits are really currently living people in a parallel/multiverse. Where then do our dead people's souls, spirits, consciousnesses go?
Okay, well, an obvious question, but I think we've approached that a little bit in the last one. In my experience, you wouldn't, if you had a spirit, which first of all is a fully conscious spirit with full memories, some remnant of a human being, full knowledge, etc., is not possible under the laws of physics. So physicists have told me. In our branch of the multiverse, anyway, the laws of physics in the world we live in. So I think you can pretty much forget the pure spirit, kind of classical spiritualist approach to that. All right, from that point of view. So, I mean, maybe, go where? I mean, there are matters of, in my experience, translation, even from many years of theological study, formal theological study. If you want to get religious, I mean, the kingdom of God, as Christians talk about it, begins now. It doesn't begin when you die, or it should anyway. And that's the whole point of faith and the church and the whole thing, is you begin now. Death is kind of a minor inconvenience. It really has not much to do with that. Now, when Protestant and Catholic were thinking maybe quite different on that, but there's very ancient thinking that does not agree with the idea that you die and the two parts of you separate and one of you goes somewhere else and the other goes nowhere. The whole point, again, if you want to stay on theology for a second, in the Gospels they stress again and again and again the physicality of the resurrection of Christ, the physicality of the resurrection of everybody. Thomas, when after the resurrection, was told, "But you don't believe it? Put your hand in my side. Feel the wounds. It's really me. I'm not a spirit." He might as well have said, So that's I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I don't know if that makes any sense, Shane.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I had a thought, and it just lost it. So let Ben go, and I'm
at my age.
I got to catch up with what I had in my thought.
All right, well, Ben, go ahead, and then we'll come back to
the trick is writing it down.
Yes.
That's why I have so many pieces of paper.
Yes.
Yeah, they do make a big distinction, because they make a distinction even in I guess we'll stick with the New and Old Testament there. They make a distinction between spirits and physical things. Like there's a very big even in some oddly translated things, they make a distinction between this is a physical thing happening versus this is a spirit doing something. And there's a really fun sort of idea that there's really sort of two deaths. There's a spiritual death and a physical death, and that the idea is that one can still be alive but be spiritually dead, and which is the worst kind. And then there's the opposite side of the spectrum, which is you can be physically dead but not spiritually, because you live on. And the thing is, they don't really go into a ton of detail about it, because at the end of the day we don't really know. But there is sort of this idea that you do your best to help those who have translated in their lives, as sort of the idea that it's not really over, it just continues.
Well, that's it. I mean, before we go back to Shane, I get where Eileen is coming from. You go to a wake, you go to a funeral, there's a loved one you've known all your life, parent or a child, God forbid a child, lying there, and they're not there. There's just the body, the remnant. So where have they gone? It's a perfectly legitimate question. I think one, however, has to ask the right question in order to get the right answer. So where are you? Like, we had a lot of people write in, gosh, it's 11 years ago now, when your grandma translated, and said, okay, well, what do you got? How do you guys handle it? So I said, it's not so much that she's still with us, it's that we're still with her in many worlds where she never died. I have a wonderful relationship with her still. You know, and it's, you have to have I think you have to have the multiverse awareness, which is in the gospel, it's in the Gita. I've read the Quran twice. Yeah, it's in there too, I think. And it's just a matter of expanding your own awareness. So, Shane, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys, and I was going to speak on some things that are in the Bible, but I still have this one hang-up for me. And so, you know, we don't know everything. Nobody does. No. And, we have theories and stuff. But so here, I base my theories obviously on an experience and, that process to identify trends in our work and everything. And you form your own conclusions. So, but what's happened to me several times, and one was a very, very strong, powerful, thing was I seen a body, or it looked like a real body, or apparition, whatever you want to call it, that spoke to me. That I never met this person in my life, but they died in real life, or their body died, I should say, and years ago, and they came to me to give me information to give to their loved one, and all that information turned out to be true. I had no way to know any of it. It was only kept between one person, and not the person I was telling, that person's other relative, and there was no way for me to know this very detailed information, and it all turned out to be 100% accurate, and it flipped their lives right upside down, and so that's the only thing that I'm kind of hung up on, that because that's happened to me a couple more times, where that's happened, and I'm just thinking, like, if it's like we say, like, maybe it's in a world where our mother didn't die or our grandmother didn't die, or whatever, and we have that kind of connection there. And emotions and the frequency of emotion can cross over into our place, and that's very strong. We know that, and not just good emotion, but bad emotion too, and that's where we get in trouble with parasites. But where I've had those experiences, and they turn out to be, people that didn't know me when they were alive, and I didn't know them, and they gave me information that turned out to be true that I wouldn't otherwise have had. That's my only hang-up.
Oh, no, I get that. But I have a couple of points on that before we go to our break and change gears in the second half hour. Why is it so physical? I mean, I don't know. I might have had experiences of people who had died here, and then seeing them, fully dressed, going about their daily lives, or trying to communicate. And why is it so physical? I think there are worlds in which they are very much aware of us, because the laws of physics are different. And I still think a multitude of bodies and facets of ourselves and everyone else, which are all part of ourselves and all part of the life of God, if you will. So, excuse me. So that being said, why don't we take our break? And when we come back, we're going to shift gears to an equally frustrating subject, and we'll, from off planet, if you want to say so. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, with our great guest co-host Shane Sirois today. Open line show here on WOON 1240 AM, 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back, so stick with us.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to The Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal on WOON AM and FM radio out of Woonsocket, Rhode Island. I'm Paul Eno. Ben Eno is here with me. And Shane Sirois as well, special guest co-host today for our open line show. And let's shift gears here, Ben, if you want to go to the next question.
Sure.
Who's that from?
It is from Mark in Chepachet, Rhode Island. And he says, I have read a bunch of UFO books over the last few years, and I just finished 2 new ones by some top-shelf UFO experts. I have more questions about contactees than I had before, as it goes. If they are all in touch with ETs, why are the ET messages so different? It's a good question. Are they really perfect, or are they sketchy? Why are the messengers and messages always different? In one book, the writer has been... Oh, I need the other page.
Oh, sorry.
In one book, the writer has been taken for spins in UFOs to 2 different planets. Are we supposed to believe this? What do you think?
What do you think, Ben?
You know what's funny? When I was recently on another podcast the other day, and this question came up because we were talking about environmentalism, and the question from the hosts was essentially, well, what do you think of ETs that are like, well, you got to stop messing up the planet? And I was like, well, first of all, why would they care? And B, second of all, why, what would they gain out of it? And the third thing is, all of these, I don't disagree that something happened to somebody. I don't disagree that there was an experience somebody had and they received a message. The thing I do kind of question is our perception of it. Because, somebody could tell me something and I could just completely misinterpret what they're saying. For example, Dad, you could say something like, have a nice day, and if I catch an inflection that's like, is he telling me to not have a nice day? What is he telling me? What is... If you're dealing with something, this just occurred to me now, so this is a live thought. If you're dealing with something that we're just going to assume it's just not human, it's completely other. You can't read body language. It's like 75% of all interaction is body language and like inflection. And if you don't get that, words coming to you could just be, essentially meaningless, right? Or we could just ascribe meanings to them, which could be why, they're all different. Like I said, not saying that someone's not experiencing something, because I'm pretty sure they are. They probably wouldn't have been as affected by it if something didn't happen. But here's the thing: I think our perceptions of it, it's all based on human perception, which is flawed in many ways. And sometimes we put our own thoughts into messages. It's like someone can read, I don't know, some religious book and be like, they're talking about this, the end of the world's coming, and it's like, no, it could be something completely different. But we're all reading the same thing, but we're getting different things from it.
Well, there are people who read our books who get different things from them, which I find disconcerting. Shane, what say you?
Yeah, I've never taken a trip on a UFO like some of these people, but I've had experiences with these things at night.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah,
we were together one night, and that happened.
Oh yeah. And so since a young child, I'd see these things in my room, and typical gray little ones, and then there was always a big tall one that was in charge, and they never spoke to me. They had no emotion, so it was hard for me to read. So Ben talking about the perception is it could be totally accurate, because I could have made up whatever I thought they were thinking or whatever. But all I know is, as an adult, I haven't had any experience with these for a while, and there's a reason for that, but they feel the same as a parasite. When you're in, I don't think that they're the same, but I don't trust them, because I think the parasites are different than these things that visit people at night, abduct them or whatever, but I think they feel the same. They have the same energy. They don't feel good to me, but I think they could be the same thing as these parasites that are attacking people, but for some reason I think there's something different about them, but they're not good, and I don't care. I know some people have had good experiences, But some people have started off having good experiences with parasites too. They'll come across as a nice, cute little girl, or or their grandma that they love so much that passed away, and whatever it takes to get you to pay attention to it and to buy into it. And so you're feeding it that attention, that energy, and then that's when it flips everything on you. So, but I've never had them talk to me, never. And I'm not saying no one else has, but I'm just saying I don't trust them. I don't trust it at all.
I agree with both of you. Certainly, I don't know if Mark is reading the same books I am, but I'm trying to read every book, not every book, but at least one book by anyone we have on the show, in ample time before they come on. Now, next week we have Kathy Martin, who is not only a good friend, she's a co-host of the show from time to time. And she has written a new book, and years ago she told us that she had some personal experiences with this sort of thing and had not mentioned it publicly because she was naturally concerned for her credibility. She is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, the first well-publicized abduction experience from 1961. And her book is a kind of a tell-all book now. And I was pretty much knocked sideways by it. I mean, it's amazing. So we're going to talk about that next week. Mark may be interested in that because all this is going to come up. And then on June 26th, we have Preston Dennett back, and Preston has written a book about the Dolly case from Florida. Dolly as in D-O-L-L-Y, a nickname of a girl who had these experiences. And I agree with Ben. I mean, I've encountered what I believe are aliens, but in the context of poltergeist cases, they were supposed to have been demons. I was working with a priest in Ed Lorraine Warren, and I've mentioned this 100 times on the show. They just didn't seem like anything but alien to me. Now, whatever that word may mean. So, these two shows, if anybody is interested in this, those who are interested in this subject will want to listen to next week's show on June 26th when we really get into this. Now the Dolly case, I'm halfway through the book. It's called Symmetry by Preston Dennett. And I have 5 pages of notes and questions already. Now, we're never going to get to all that on the show, but it's just, I mean, everything in the book is possible. A little imagination, little open-mindedness, it's all possible. But I don't trust it. I agree with Shane and as Ben said, and Ben too. So we'll leave that for those shows, and I think people will be interested. So who's next there, Ben?
So we have Pam from Whitby, England.
Oh, okay.
And Pam writes to us, there are a lot of new UFO books around, and some of the experiencers' experiences are way out there.
Yeah, we have a number of questions on this same subject.
Right. You guys have studied theology, you more so than I did. Why do so many of these ET contacts experiences remind me of messages from the Virgin Mary and other saints? I'm thinking of Fatima, Lourdes, and the rest.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and we've dealt with that here and there on the show. It's very interesting that, because Fatima and Lourdes were, Fatima's in Portugal and Lourdes is in France, and in the 19th century and in the early 20th century, respectively, there were apparitions of what was believed to be the Virgin Mary to some children. And the Catholic Church, actually, which is very persnickety about these sorts of things, actually accepted those as legitimate miracles. However, I don't know if they considered the fact that those the places where these occurred were considered to be locally fairy caves, or fairy grottos as they were called, and there had been constant apparitions of weird creatures and strange figures, including ladies in white or blue, since pagan times or even before that. So I find that quite interesting, and we often find that these could be what today we call flap areas. So I'm not sure I trust those things either, and they really do kind of remind me of some of the alien experiences today. Now the Romans would see weird stuff in the sky, and they call them flying shields. All the way through history, people have seen things and put it in their own cultural context. So since when everybody was when Christianity pretty much was dominant in Europe and other areas, people would see the Virgin Mary. or assume it was the Virgin Mary, regardless of what she said, or other things in the sky. The whole miracle of the sun, as it was called at Fatima, was kind of a major thing. And then today, when in a more secular time, for better or for worse, people see people from other planets saying the same things, doing in many ways the same things, and I find that interesting. I don't know, Shane?
Yeah, I agree. But like we said, I don't trust too many of the things. I have been had messages or contacts from what I say is God. He's during my experience where I was taught how to help people with negative entities. I don't think a parasite would teach me how to get rid of itself.
Some of this is entirely legitimate.
Absolutely, but I still don't trust a lot of these things, so we got to be very careful. And so with me knowing how they tick, kind of since a young age, and being able to get rid of them very easily because I understand the mechanics behind it all. So now I'm starting to I think more about these visits that I've had since a child, because I've had those nightly visits. I think were only meant to maybe kind of deter me from doing or putting into place what I was gifted by God, this information, and maybe they were trying to scare me off or something like that, because they would never approach me during the day. It was only when I was helpless and I was asleep would they show up, and and I mean, I felt excruciating pain just probably 4 years ago in this house, and that was, I think, one of the last times it's happened to me. It felt like they were shoving something sharp and long into both my rib cages, and I woke up and I had puncture wounds and bruising. Wow. And but I was it was kind of like I was kind of out of it. So I woke up and I felt this pain because I could sense that they were there, and I felt this pain in my sides, and I just black out kind of thing. And I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, and sure enough, I got these bruises and everything. And but these, like I said, these things, I don't trust them, and because I know how to get rid of them, they're only going to hit me when I'm asleep. So they're no good. But yeah, they'll appear as anything. They'll appear as your mom. They'll appear as the Virgin Mary if they need to. And I'm not saying that those things don't happen. I'm just saying be real careful in what you buy into.
Yeah, Ben.
Sure.
And then we'll get to a question from Peter.
Yes. I think we should start off with a fun sort of comparison here. Mythology, right? Why are a majority of religions throughout the world are based around stories? They're based around a narrative, right? And we all love to hear stories, but why do we like to hear stories? Because in some way, shape, or form, we participate in them as we listen. It's why we like going to the movies. It's why we like, listening to people tell jokes or anecdotes, because it helps us feel like we're participating in something. And there's a really weird thing that's happening now, because we've put ourselves into sort of an odd intellectual box here in the modern world, where we've isolated ourselves from everybody else, and a lot of things due to 19th century German scholars and many others have contributed to this sort of weird separation that we've participated in for the last 200, 300 years or so, where we separate things as via rational or intuitive, and never the twain shall meet. And we're suffering the consequences of that now, because we're sort of forced to deal with this re-enchantment of the world around us. And I'm going to expand on that in a little bit. So as a mythology, I would consider every aspect of the paranormal mythology. And I would consider it that, not as, it's myth, therefore it's not real, because that became the definition in the 19th century for some reason. The definition is it's a story we're participating in. So when you read, the story of King Lycanthro, and how he became a wolf, we were like, oh, well, that's dumb. But then, we have someone on the show that's like, well, upright canine cryptids. And we're like, that's it. That's the thing right there. But here's the thing. There's no difference. It's the same stories that people are participating in, right? So, yeah, sure, the cultural context might be different, but here's the thing. The patterns will always stay the same because history repeats itself constantly because it's a pattern. And we as humans live in patterns. It's why, the upper crust or whoever you want to say is in charge is trying so hard to break out of the human condition. We're doing our best to break out of it because that's the one thing that hasn't changed. We may speak different languages, our technology's different, but the same people in ancient Rome, Greece, wherever, are all experiencing the same things we are today. The only difference is they experienced it ever so slightly differently because of how the world was viewed. They knew they were participating in a story, and they knew that all these layers of existence were happening all at the same time. That's why religion was a thing, because, say something bad happens to you. I learned this really recently. There was any artifact you typically find, because amulets were really big back in the day. A lot of Romans and Greeks would typically have a Medusa medallion that they would wear around their necks. And there was an idea put out by Aristotle that if you reenact something bad won't happen to you. That was kind of the idea behind Greek tragedies, was if something bad happens and if you're witnessing it and a part of it, then nothing bad will happen to you. So the idea was you have something bad to ward off something bad. The same kind of idea with gargoyles almost. That it's these things don't change. They've stuck with us forever. The idea of having these quote unquote demons or devils that are out there to trick you has been around forever. The idea of having people visiting you from the sky has been around forever. But here's the thing, we're no closer to figuring out what's happening. With all of the technology around us, all we have is the human experience. So we have all these things and all these patterns that will just constantly manifest over time that we're all participating in. The only difference is we all think we're the main character. And we're not.
Exactly.
We're all participating, and we're all, we all have our parts to play, and none of us is the main character.
Right.
And that's my spiel.
Well put. Let's get to a question from Peter in Bogota, Colombia. Peter Shelley, one of our guest co-hosts.
First thing Peter says is, welcome back, Shane. A few years ago on BehindTheParanormal.com, you mentioned some kind of an object, perhaps a glass globe, that had an ability to pick up reflections of paranormal images. Can you please re-describe this device and share what experiences you had with this?
Yeah, so it's not a particular glass globe or any particular item. It's various different things. So let me explain. So what I was describing was glass objects that only reflect light. Not only reflect light, but alter its vibrational frequency. So it's altering the light. It can, like water. Water can change direction. It alters the light. And so we have light and we have energy. We have light and some sounds that we can't hear, some light spectrums we can't see. So we need a medium to transform it so we can see these things. So I realized this a long time ago when I'm doing my investigations is why are the most active homes surrounded by rivers or streams or, any water body, but almost always rivers and streams because there's an inconsistency in the water, just like the best captures using the images that you use with these glass objects I was talking about. I formed that off of, all right, so I think something's happened with the water. With rivers and streams being inconsistent, it's transforming frequency somehow to allow a different parallel or a different world or whatever to intersect with ours. It's that medium. It's allowing it to cross over, and now we can have an exchange. They can mess with us, or we can see something that happened at a different time. And but also these parasites kind of can come through there, and we're able to see, feel, hear them. But something is needed for that to happen. Just like dogs can see things that we can't see, and animals, cats, same thing. There's things that we can't see, we can't interact with, but we need something to allow that convergence to take place. And so rivers and streams seem to be a strong medium in allowing that process to take place, or it is totally responsible for it. So So a light wave is an electromagnetic wave which travels through a vacuum in space. Light waves are produced by vibrating electric charges. An electromagnetic wave is a transverse wave which has an electric and magnetic component. Electromagnetic waves exist with an enormous range of frequency, and so refraction is when light waves change direction as they pass from one medium to another. Light travels slower in an air vacuum, and so it's slower in water. As light travels into a different medium, the change in speed bends the light and changes the original frequency, and allowing us to see something. So also the same thing with these flap areas. All these flap areas that Paul was talking about, almost all of them are surrounded by rivers and streams. So that these energies and frequencies that we can't see or interact with on a daily basis that are in parallels are now can converge with us through the process through the water that changes that frequency and brings it into ours, so we're able to see and hear and feel. So when I said, like, with these taking photographs, I said, so if we can do this, maybe through the process of reflective photography, maybe we can kind of repeat that and maybe capture images. Now we're only capturing light, and it's not the other interactions that we talked about, such as, like, in a home where people have things going on, or the flap areas that the rivers and streams are responsible for, but the imperfect glass. So it's going to be like the ones that we found are most effective in capturing weird images, like legit, like crystal clear images of weird creatures and people and different times. It's inconsistent, just like the rivers or streams. So it's like blown glass, like old blown glass that might be thicker in one area, or, I mean, there's no. So you think about the crystal ball. People used to see things in the crystal ball. I think a lot of people that use that are just scamming you, but I think there's something to be said for that, because it's gone back a long time. So it's something that's altering those light frequencies that's allowing us to capture images. So I had a guy on my team, Mike Sullivan, years ago, and that was his purpose. So he did EVP, but we tasked him with doing reflective photography, and he was capturing some outstanding things. And he could use anything. He could use an old bottle, an old mirror, things that are, like I said, worked better when they were inconsistent, like old blown glass or something like that, and was capturing just very, very vivid images of things that weren't there. And so there's a guy named William Lawrence that I've talked to years ago. I haven't talked to him for years, but he come across, he's an investigator, and he come across the same type of realization, and he uses a different method, but he kind of combines the two, and he takes a clear bottle, like a spring water bottle, takes the label off it, puts water in it, holds it up to the sun, and the rays shine through the water in the bottle onto a black object, and he'll take a picture of that, and he's capturing faces and people, like, in robes, and some of them I think is pareidolia, other ones are phenomenal, really good photographs. Same type of idea, different technique, but really the process is altering the light waves, and I think there's so much to be said, like, Tesla recognized all this a long time ago, and who's going to argue with him? But vibration, energy, and frequency is kind of like the secret. If we could figure that out, we could figure out the secret to the universe. And so when I think of, like, vibration, energy, and frequency, you think of God is the Word, right? So they say God is the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word, or the Word was God. And so what's a word, right? Like spoken word, it's a sound, it's a frequency. And then, you got Jesus as the light. I mean, I think we can interpret things differently, but I think sometimes things are so right in front of us that we walk right by it. And I think, when I had my death experience, I was told that emotion, that's how I help people, is I manipulate emotion. And that's a frequency. And I was told that. And so people have to, in order to get out of their dark place, because they're in a lower emotion, I have to elevate their emotion, which elevates their frequency, that puts them in a better place. And Jesus gave us a good example, right, of he is the light. To be in the light, he's elevating our emotions by not carrying dark emotions or lowered emotions with us. We're able to let go of those, right? So there's so much to be said with the light, the energy, and the frequency, but the capturing of those photographs is we're changing, we're manipulating, or we're altering the frequencies of those light by taking reflective photography of water or glass or mirrors or things of that nature. And let me tell you something. This is not pareidolia. Some of these we gotten mind-blowing images, and I totally believe it's because we're altering frequencies that we couldn't see with our eyes, and we're bringing them into our spectrum through that process.
That's fascinating. I'm thinking too of the photography of Stella Lansing, a lady from Sterling, Mass, who wasn't almost in our listing. Yeah, it's in our listing area, really. And in the 1960s, she would take photos, and she just had the knack of picking up things that Shane has just described. You know, whether it was something the lens she was using, I don't know. I didn't know her, but I mean, we mentioned her in lectures. And there were all sorts of examples of this. I mean, I knew Ted Sirois, who in the early days, mid-20th century, was a guy who could look into the lens of a camera, and whatever he was thinking would come out on the film. Sometimes they didn't even need a camera. He'd look at a packet of Polaroid film. And, I was wet behind the ears, but I didn't say anything illegitimate about it. He had an interesting life. He was well known to the police, but he had this talent, which was quite incredible. So there we are. I guess we're just about out of time. Shane, tell us where people can find out more about you.
Yeah, just trueghost.com, trueghost.com. Website's going to be getting an update very, very soon, but my contact information is there, and you can reach me through that.
Very good. And Shane will be back with us in a month on June 12th for our next open line show, and if not before. And we're just really happy to have him back with us. And let's get on with our announcements.
Yes. And we have quite a few announcements, especially this time of year. You know, we got lots of stuff going on. And the Exeter UFO Festival is back after a 2-year hiatus. That will center at the historic Exeter, New Hampshire. That will center at the historic Exeter, New Hampshire Town Hall over the Labor Day weekend. That's September 3rd and 4th. More information will be forthcoming. This is a great event sponsored by the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club to benefit local children's charities. We plan to do our traditional live broadcast from the Exeter UFO Festival on Sunday with a panel of speakers. The subject of our talk will be time storms, with thanks to the great British researcher Jenny Randalls, who coined the term. This is a very fun event. The whole town gets involved. It's really a wonderful time. Restaurants will serve things like Roswell Burgers, Final Frontier Franks, and Alien Crunch ice cream, and more information to come.
Yeah, I like the ice cream. Visit our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, along with Shane's website, trueghost.com, where you can find over 1,100 hours, well, not on True Ghost, but on Behind the Paranormal, you can find over 1,100 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Archive Radio, and here on WON AM and FM, including the ones that have been restored in the archives at BehindTheParanormal.com and other areas. You can also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We have a show app, a rather simple one. It's free. It's right there on the opening page of BehindTheParanormal.com, and you'll be able to pick up our shows as they are posted online, the recorded ones.
Indeed. And our show website has a charity page with links to several good causes we've adopted, including Hope for Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Massachusetts, USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, the Sisterhood of Ground Zero, and most recently, the Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund.
Okay, so what's on the front burner for next week, Ben?
Well, the front right burner has, that's next week, May 22nd. We'll welcome back legendary Kathleen Martin for a jarring look into her new tell-all book with her own extraterrestrial contact, Forbidden Knowledge.
Quite a book, I'll tell you. We leave you today with a thought from 19th century English romantic poet John Keats. nothing ever becomes real until it is experienced. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Shane Sirois. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.